We're gonna be on audio here. It should be on now. Yeah, we are.
We are live on YouTube.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
George Brown. Oh, no.
Hello.
Oh, they can all hear you, so you watch out.
Hey, Mr. Brown.
Good evening. Is that? Oh yes, I noticed. I know the smile. I got you. That's not your name.
No, it's a bit of an improvement from me.
Okay.
So
Good Howard.
How you doing, sir?
Oh, young man, doing great, man. Doing great. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good, all things considered.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, I know.
mm-hmm.
We ready?
There you go.
We got a minute. A little less than a minute.
Oh yeah. Watch.
Ray, thanks for doing all that email work.
Oh, no problem. Quite a few of them. Okay, I have 6:30. Can we go ahead and get started? We have a very optimistic agenda tonight, and we've got 3 guest speakers that we're going to get to here momentarily. And I'll start with the COVID-19 statement. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, state of emergency, and Governor Beshear's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting is being held via teleconference pursuant to Senate Bill 150, as signed by the governor on March 30th, 2020, and Attorney General Opinion 20-05, in accordance with KRS 61.826, because it is not feasible to offer a primary physical location for the meeting. I'd like to welcome you all tonight. Good to see everybody. Those joining us on Facebook, on YouTube Live, thank you for joining us. And before we get to our guest speakers, since there may be some individuals, I know some of the speakers joining us already, and some of the people on YouTube Live that that may not know, maybe joining us for the first time, I'll go ahead and we'll go around the screen here, and we'll have everybody introduce yourself. Just you can just tell us your name and what organization you're with, and I'll start with Legislator Brown.
I got to get used to how this all works. I'm George Brown. I'm the representative for the House of Representatives, 77th House District.
Okay. Mr. Shirley?
David Shirey, the Senior Minister at Central Christian Church.
Dr. Shine?
Rich Shine, University of Kentucky.
Rachel?
Rachel Childress, Lexington Habitat for Humanity.
Okay, Russ in the back there, would you like to?
Yep. Russ Barclay, Executive Director with the Lexington Community Land Trust.
Okay. Mr. Dow?
Harding Dowell, an architect with Group 4 Architecture Research and Planning.
Okay. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Hodge?
Robert Hodge with Hodge Properties.
And Shayla Lynch, who's our co-chair, our other co-chair, she is actually going to be joining us a little late. She has a board meeting tonight. And Reverend Brock will be joining us a little bit late this evening. And I noticed Councilmember Brown just joined us. Would you like to just, man that needs no introduction, Councilmember Brown, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Ray. I'm James Brown, council member of the 1st District. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, welcome to everyone tonight. We have quite an extensive agenda, and we're going to get to our guest speakers. First, Mr. Howard distributed this past week our minutes from last week's meeting. Did everybody have an opportunity to review those minutes? Do we have any corrections or questions on the minutes? Okay, having none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last
I
meeting?
move that we approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I
Rachel?
second.
All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, great. All right. So based on our conversations from the last meeting, there's been a great interest of this group, rightly so, to have, you know, what we're going to be recommending to the mayor affects a lot of people, and certainly some of us may not be in a position to adequately express what people go through as a result of gentrification. So, like I said, this group rightly wanted to hear from some individuals in the community that have been deeply impacted by this issue, and of course, we want to get these testimonies to us to kind of shape our discussion and for us to make really informed recommendations to the mayor that is going to be impactful and most impact the communities that we're seeing affected by gentrification. So we're happy to have 3 individuals this evening that have agreed to come and share their personal stories. It takes a lot of courage to come up and, you know, broadcast your story to not only a group of people you don't know, but everybody else joining us on YouTube. So we appreciate the opportunity for you to come here and hear from you. So what we're going to do, we have Byron Mitchell who's going to be speaking first. What we're going to do is, you know, there will be a little bit of leeway, but we're asking for 3 to 5 minutes for the testimony, and then a period of time for this group to be able to ask any questions of the individuals. And hopefully the plan is to do a maximum of about 15 minutes each person. And we'll try to stick to that because, like I said, we do have quite a bit of stuff to get through, and I hate to, you know, we got a lot of momentum from the last meeting, so I hate to lose that before the meeting ends. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mitchell and let you begin.
Yes, my name is Byron Mitchell. I'm with the Lexington Community Land Trust. Not only with the Lexington Community Land Trust, I'm with Grounded Solutions, nonprofit where we speak all over the world. Over 225 land trusts all over the United States. The impact, I guess what you're going in and talking about gentrification, my neighborhood is the south end of town, Rupp Arena, the Newtown Pike extension. And what came about on our part is we've been talking about this Newtown Pike extension for over 50, 60 years. But in the process of that, you know, we had the federal highway came in, the city of Lexington. We had a lot of entities that came on board that took care of our neighborhood as far as to put us on a land trust. But with the gentrification, if it was coming in, what you see over in this area and the few people that we do have, they wouldn't be here. With the way and the model that they use to come in and take out houses, which I look at, coming in and saying, okay, I want to buy this house and then I'm gonna fix it up. And I expect something out of this situation, this house. But at the process of that, when you come in and put in a good piece of money in a probably $8,000, $10,000 home, and then now you can sell it for $150,000, where the property taxes goes up, a whole lot of other things go up along with that. So then it moves people out of the neighborhood that can't afford it. with the taxes. So other than that, though, everything else worked pretty good for us, what we have going on in this neighborhood. And we're still progressing and still growing. Is there any questions?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Does anybody have on this panel have any questions for Mr. Mitchell?
We got a quick
Yeah, go ahead,
question.
Mark.
Mr. Mitchell, when you say, obviously the property tax increase is a real problem, and you mentioned that other things go up with it. Can you be a little bit more specific about the other things that the other sort of cost of living things that increase when gentrification affected your neighborhood?
Well, it wasn't so much affected on the neighborhood far, but what happens is that I have seen in different neighborhoods that when if you come in and you have a home that's restructured and a lot of money is poured in, and then you have a house over for $8,000 or $6,000, then it kind of has a problem as time goes on. Not really for the person who bought the home, but then at the same time, the taxes, if you got a certain amount of houses that are being renovated and put up, then eventually that neighborhood is getting ready to be pushed out. Some of the people, if they can't afford it, then they're gonna have to come out of there. You know, because if you talking about that type of houses and then you talking about an $8,000 and $9,000 house sitting here, eventually they're gonna have to fix the home up. But if they don't have the money, the numbers to fix it up, then we got a little problem. But then it splits up the whole neighborhood to a certain extent. Now I look at better in a neighborhood, that's no problem. But then with what's been going on, what I've been seeing in a few neighborhoods, a lot of them people can't afford just even with paying the taxes because everything goes up in that area.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Okay, Byron, just you talked about the quickest thing to understand is the investment, but what about the displacement of the people that lived in the near South End?
Yeah, that pretty good on. Well, it was a situation where on the displacement on that, they gave us every opportunity, and the ones that lived here, like say we had rental homes and places before when we had houses being built. But the displacement of others, hey, it's one of them things. They gave them a few dollars and that was it. Now those people practically are out in the street. A lot of them is having a hard time trying to make it because what they was paying. Now the displacement, they kind of shifted them out. Now they some of them don't have a place to even go at. So it made it kind of tough on that end too if they didn't have, financially set or of that nature. But still at the same time, displacement. I mean, they ain't no but a few of us still left here in this area.
That was. Excuse me, Byron. That was my thought. Is that as you drive through the near South End, Pleasant Green Hill.
Yes,
and all of that neighborhood primarily started with Patterson Street, where Rupp Arena came, or the Lexington Center Corporation, and bought all that property up to Maxwell Street on the hill. That was all gone.
Yes,
and the same thing with Spring Street and the other streets. And now that you got this issue, people have left that area, the South End, and have not come back.
No, they haven't. And the thing is, now you have Manchester Street, you got the Borough House District, you got everything building around this neighborhood. And like I say, now the people are saying, I can't go back over there. I can't afford to come back over there. But then they don't have the means to a certain extent. But like I say, displacement, when they just shoved you on out and that was it, they can't come back.
Let me ask one more question, Brian. Byron, that as you talked about Newtown Pike Extension and the federal government and the resources that they put in, there was a plan to try to keep people from being displaced. Now I know some down on the street over there under the viaduct that they built housing over there. Mm-hmm. But that didn't happen up on Pine and Patterson and Maxwell and up there in that area.
Right. It's just more, I guess, this they section and looked at this what this Newtown Pike can join in with the University of Kentucky and coming off the highway and alleviating traffic. So basically, they couldn't build these homes without that road. They couldn't put that road in without these the people is dealing. So the thing is, you kind of look at all that too. They just kind of concentrate on coming into this city, Newtown Pike, going around the downtown area and bringing it around. You know, but like I say, that's what caused to separate.
Any other questions for Mr. Mitchell? Okay. Mr. Mitchell, we thank you for joining us and telling your story. It's been very informative, and I'm sure it will assist us in formulating some recommendations to the city. And if you can think of anything else along the line after you leave here, you feel free to contact us via the email and talk to Russ, and he'll get back in touch with us.
We sure will. No problem. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Our next speaker will be Michelle Davis.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Davis, and I live in the St. Martin's Village neighborhood, which was a predominantly historical Black neighborhood when my parents bought houses here. The problem that I see with our neighborhood now is that we're getting inundated with a lot of postcards from realtors, real estate offices, asking to buy our property. And the people that I've talked to, no one is interested in selling their property. We have a lot of people that have had family members, their parents that have passed on, and a lot of the parents' kids have kept the property. Some of them haven't. Some of them have lost the property. So then the bank that has the mortgage on the houses, they come in, they gut the houses out, and then they resell the property for $152,000 and ranging from $145,000 to $152,000. Okay, the people that live in the community can't afford that. And then you have a lot of seniors that still live in this neighborhood that will increase their property taxes. And I'm not sure if they're going to be able to pay their property taxes come November, December. And, you know, that's going to be a real issue. And I've noticed that we have a lot of Hispanics that have moved into our neighborhood, and real nice neighbors. I go up and introduce myself to them and welcome them into our neighborhood. And they're coming from Cardinal Hill area, so they don't, Cardinal Valley. So they don't understand, you know, some of the rules and regulations of the neighborhood association. So they'll come down and ask me questions. We do have property that is up for rent. And I tried to call one of the property owners to find out, you know, how much they were renting out the property, but I didn't get an answer. So, but for a majority of the housing here in our neighborhood, most of the kids keep their property, which is what I did. I kept my home place and just added on. And some lost their property, which companies, mortgage companies would come in, buy the mortgage out, take the mortgage and come in and gut the houses out, and then ask for $152,000 when these houses back when they were built were like $20,000, $30,000 homes. And it's driving up the property tax on those seniors, because this area and my neighborhood does have a lot of seniors in this neighborhood. So those are some of the problems that we're having, you know, just flipping these houses, and we're trying to keep them affordable for our people to be able to, you know, come in and buy the houses, but they can't afford the, you know, $152,000 home.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Davis?
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
I think what I'm hearing, being a landlord myself and a developer,
Yes.
I know I do go to a lot of neighborhood meetings. I haven't been to you guys yet, but I think what I'm hearing is developers need to have more connection with the neighborhood that they're moving in, I guess just kind of bridge the neighborhood and the new developer together. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that would help. That would definitely help. And then, we also would like to, we can't figure out a way, but, if there's a neighbor in our neighborhood that can't afford property tax, how we can find resources to help them out so that they don't lose their property. That's another problem too. We don't want it to be sold on the courthouse steps down there, for delinquent taxes for a couple years. So, but that's a touchy situation when you start getting into somebody's personal finances. We don't want anybody to lose their houses.
Right, and I understand. And I think both Mr. Browns may be able to maybe help you guys or send David O'Neill maybe to the neighborhood association, because if they elderly, I think there's some kind of exemption that they can get for the taxes.
Okay, we need that. And just another situation, one of our neighbors just passed away within the last month, and our house is going to be coming, they're not going to be able to afford the mortgage. One of the family members decided that she was moving out to get her own place because nobody else was helping to pay the mortgage. And so that's going to be a problem too. They work, some of them work, some of them don't, but trying to bridge that family together so that they don't lose the home, their family home. And I don't know how you approach that. And those are the, and what kind of resources do they need that I can, tell them, you need to go talk to so-and-so, and maybe they can tell you how you can keep your family home without losing it. And then they're going to be displaced because they have no place else to go. That's another problem we have.
Appreciated Mr. Hodges' word there, because Ms. Davis followed Mr. Mitchell and both mentioned the increase in property taxes, making it difficult for the residents to stay. So whatever we can do to consider how we can address that, we're going to need to mark for ourselves. So whatever the resource was that Mr. Hodge was mentioning and other things, I'm just hearing that was mentioned by both of you. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for notating that. Appreciate it. Any other questions for Ms. Davis? Yes, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Ray. And thank you, Ms. Davis, for calling in and sharing with us. I think you're in a unique situation, like some other neighborhood associations. I think if you have a real active neighborhood association, so there's an opportunity for the PBA to come and talk about the homestead exemption program that's available.
Okay.
And then also, if you know of investors that are trying to buy property into the neighborhood, you can invite them to the neighborhood association to meet the neighbors and build a rapport, build a relationship.
Okay.
And then I also think there's an opportunity to talk about succession plans for families in the case of when somebody passes or property changes hands. There might be something that the neighborhood association can provide as far as succession planning, so they don't lose that property because there wasn't a will and there's so many siblings. So I think neighborhood associations actually have a real good opportunity to make some of these connections and share information. And anything that my office can do to help work on any of those initiatives, we will be willing to do. So thank you for sharing, and you made some really good points. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that, because, I did not know that these services were out there, that we could talk to these people, because this is something new for me. And so any kind of advice that any of you all are willing to give me, and once we get back into our shelter where we can have a meeting, because I can't have a meeting with all of our officers because everybody doesn't have a computer or they're not computer literate. And so, but our neighborhood has been meeting, just different neighbors, just trying to keep up with what's going on in our neighborhood. But as soon as we can get back in the building, I definitely will be calling you, Councilman Brown, and others, so that we can, get these ideals put in place. And I just hope that they don't lose their house between now and then. So Councilman Brown, I will probably be calling you personally, and you and I can sit down and try to come up with a plan on trying to help this family. I hate to see them displaced. It's one of the houses that Officer Ryan came in, and he was a veteran, and they redid the whole house. And you know, it's just it's hard talking to people about money, you know, and you know, this is, and trying to explain this is what you need to do, because I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I just don't want to see this particular family, which I know is getting ready to get displaced, probably within the next maybe 2 or 3 months, if we don't do something now.
Yes, Mr. Shirey.
Yes, I'm just wondering if it's feasible to
Uh-huh.
create some sort of a hotline that, I don't know who would be the individual or part of our city that would be able to staff that, who could answer questions about displacement or the potential of that, and provide these kinds of resources and direction at, you know, readily available, and that number be available to our neighborhood associations and to citizens. Just because I'm hearing these kinds of questions, Ms. Davis, and there
Yes.
ought to be some central way in which you can get those kinds of answers. I realize you're going to turn to our council members, but I'm just wondering if that might be a possibility.
That sounds like a great idea, and that way we could, you know, give the neighbors this number, and it would be anonymous because we don't want to get into anybody's business. And that way you all could somebody could offer them the help that they need. I just don't want, you know, just don't want to see anybody lose their home. That's a great idea. Can you make that happen?
You're helping us to think about what the solutions may be, and we're grateful for that.
Okay, well, I appreciate it.
Any other questions for Ms. Davis? Okay, Ms. Davis, we greatly appreciate it. You've been very helpful. You're helping us see some common themes in these stories, and hopefully we can take this information you've shared with us and come up with some strong recommendations to make the community a better place. So we appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. You all have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Our final speaker will be Miss Angela Green Hampton. Welcome, Miss Hampton. And I'll let you go ahead and begin.
Thank you. I'm the president of the Georgetown Street Neighborhood Association, and I'm speaking on behalf of our members and people in our community. We've had, you know, issues or concerns in our past neighborhood meetings, and some of the concerns are that real estate investors and home buyers are coming into the neighborhoods, and especially preying on the elderly who can't afford, you know, home improvement. So they're buying their homes and telling them that they'll be able to move back in. However, when that happens, they charge, you know, astronomical rent, like anywhere from $800 to $1,200 a month. So they feel like they're pushed out of their neighborhoods. Another concern is that, you know, the banks or these investors, they're buying air property that people can't afford to make improvements, and then they're, you know, as Byron and Michelle said, they're gutting them, they're fixing them up, and then they're selling them at high rates, and so people are not afford. The property value goes up, and of course people's taxes go up. So that's another concern. Also, there's a concern about the postcards. We get them all the time. I get them. I'll pay cash for your house, this type of thing. I get phone calls. Of course, I don't answer them, because if I don't have your number in my phone, I'm not answering. But I will listen to the messages and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, we pay cash for your house. So those are, and it's pretty, you know, aggravating to get these calls and postcards all the time. So our members and people in the community are concerned about how people get information. And I know that's pretty easily, you know, people are easily able to get that through PVA and things like that. So those are just some of the concerns.
Okay, do we have any questions for Ms. Green? Ms. Hampton?
Ms. Green, and thank you for being here today. You spoke
You're
with
welcome.
the elderly residents were being targeted. Are they largely renters in your neighborhood or homeowners, or is it a mix?
Well, it's mixed. They're homeowners, and then they're promising that, hey, we'll buy your house and we'll fix it up, and then you can move back in, and then that's not happening. Or they're renters and say, oh, we'll rent it to you, and but they're charging really high rent that people can't afford.
Thank you.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Ms. Robert Hodge, I've been to several of you guys' meetings, and actually am a member of your organization. I noticed you said something about improvements. I know you guys are having, not as bad as it is on the East End, but are the improvements from the city, and what I'm getting at is it code enforcement requiring the improvements on some of these properties that people cannot afford to do the improvements? So at the end, ultimately, unfortunately, they end up selling?
I believe that is the case. And some of them, but some of the people, want to neighborhoods because they can't afford to move back in. If that makes sense. These are just, from concerns of the community and the neighborhood.
Okay, any other questions?
I'll ask a quick question. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing the concerns there in the Georgetown neighborhood. And I'm curious, as you all have been having conversations there, have you all been able to identify what resources you need in order to help maintain community cohesion, help people stay in their homes?
That's another thing, as Michelle said, that we would need help with as well, to provide them with resources to help them, keep their homes. If they want to make improvements to the home, what type of resources are available to them to do that?
Okay. Any others before we let Ms. Green go? Okay, well, we greatly appreciate you coming and speaking to us tonight. Again, I'm sure some of the things that you brought up will help formulate, hopefully, a plan of attack to combat some of these things and prevent these kind of things occurring in the future. So again, thank you. And likewise, if you think of anything else after leaving tonight, feel free to reach out to one of us individually or email the city's email address for this commission, and we'd be glad to follow up with you.
Thank you. We certainly will. And thank you all for listening to our concerns.
Okay. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. And I'll let the record show that our fearless co-chair, Shayla Lynch, has joined us on the podium there. And we'll go move right on into our action items. The first one being the code enforcement data. And we appreciate Councilmember Brown for providing us a packet regarding the Planning, Public and Safety Commission on the code enforcement, the summary, the comprehensive review of code enforcement. That's what I was looking for. And based on our conversation yesterday, we had a key theme regarding changes need to be made for code enforcement, specifically transparency, equity, and ease of access, and the need of code enforcement violation process. Does anybody want to lead us in this discussion again and revisit this issue after the information that's been provided to us this past week? Go ahead.
I have not seen that information. I'd be glad to get that.
Oh, you have not seen it? Okay. Yeah, we will. gladly get that to you.
Mhm. I'll make sure you get that email today.
Hey, Ray, the only thing I'll say, I guess I don't want to lead it, but the conversation, but I think what is identified in the packet and what was presented to council was just kind of a clear overview of code enforcement, how they work, the process. And then they also had some recommendations as far as things to improve that we talked about at the last meeting. I know one of the things that they put into place, and it's one of the task force recommendations, but they've already put it into place, is the closeout letter for some of the infractions. What was shared with us was sometimes property owners get cited for violations and they address them, but before they had a closeout letter, they didn't know that they were in compliant or it had been revisited. So that's one thing that they put in place, so that, you know, that eases or should ease the folks worrying about when code enforcement is going to come back. Am I in compliant? Do I have to worry about getting cited again? And then some of the other things that that were mentioned, I was trying to look back and see if it's mentioned in the presentation, but I know it's one of the things that that we had talked about. Kind of sort of was the way that code enforcement officers interact with the public. And what was shared is, that, they're one of the most public facing divisions in government, the way they interact with residents and property owners and just the public. And that maybe there's an opportunity to enhance their customer service training and presentation. So that's something that I know was put into place and going to get incorporated into their training. I know it hasn't taken place yet because of the pandemic, but I know it's, one of the steps that they're taking to better equip the code enforcement officers to be better at the job that they do. So that's just a couple of things that I know that came out of this presentation to council. And I know there may be others that, or some information that we talked about at the last meeting that was identified in this presentation.
Yeah,
Back
go
at,
ahead. Yeah,
back on
sorry.
the floor.
Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, no, you having challenges like me. I think that code enforcement is one entity aside from LFUCG police that are heavy-handed in their approach, and it's their way or the highway. You either comply or they're coming at you with fines and to deal with you. I think that there needs to be in their training a level of empathy and understanding for especially elderly people. And I'm one of them now myself, but especially elderly people of having to or being able to get through a traumatic situation, because having your home or having taxes not being paid or have the government coming and asking you questions and looking for money is traumatic to people who don't have it. So, the empathy and the understanding that goes along with them doing their job. Code enforcement is a vital need for our government, but it doesn't have to be without any empathy or understanding of people's situations. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to that. Thank you. So, sorry, Mr. Hodge, go ahead.
Well, you go ahead because you want to add to that. Mine's is a little different. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, what I'll say is I agree with the need for some more education of our code enforcement officials, in part because having looked through the documents that we received, and it was literally just one example, but I can imagine if there's one, there's 1,000 behind it. The things that the properties are being cited for, in my experience, are incredibly minor in terms of the safety of the house, or the thermal performance, et cetera, but our specialty contractors that are expensive to hire. And so there's that side of it that I think we're citing people for things that are not, that to me don't rise to the level of a citation, and that is something that could be easily abused, I think. The second thing is there are structural things within the code enforcement programs and the financial assistance programs that exclude our most vulnerable citizens. Things that I noticed in reading through just a spot check of some of the violations, whereby a property must be condemned in order for that resident to be eligible for financial assistance. That seems like an invitation for bad landlords to keep properties just good enough to not be condemned. The other is that there's a 1-year restriction on residency, which I think says to people who are relocating to our community that for some reason they don't matter unless they've lived here for a year. And the other is that there's a 3-year limit on repeat assistance through community and resident services. These are the kinds of rules that to me don't really make sense and can stand in the way of us identifying people who really need help. So those were just some observations that got me fired up in terms of reading through what we received.
Mr. Hodge?
Yes, thank you. Well, what jumps out to me, and I think Mr. Brown being in District 1, it should be a concern of yours as well. And I know you're gonna say old housing, but when you got 31% and the next closest is 14%, and I don't know, it's District 11, probably West End. I'm just guessing, but that should jump out at anybody, that big gap. And also, you know, when you talk about code enforcement, and I know me being a property owner kind of sways one way, but the city ought to be the example. They ought to be the big brother. But a lot of you guys may not know the city property cannot be examined by code enforcement. And, you know, when you ride by the mayor's building or the center building, you got to drive fast before the whole building maybe fall on you. So, you know, I think the city needs to be a little bit more compassionate about code enforcement, especially the way some of their buildings look as well. But my main concern is this 31% in District 1.
Hey, I'm not coming to defend the city, but District 1 includes West End, East End, Winburn Hall Creek. It includes a lot of dense neighborhoods. And District 11 is Cardinal Valley.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Okay, so as we formulate our recommendations, does anybody want to start throwing things out there that we can make as part of the recommendations? Because we need to start formulating some specific recommendations. And I know code enforcement has been a big discussion point for this meeting as well as the last meeting. Are there any things that people want to put on the table for the group to vet to see if this is something we're going to go in the final report, or are we ready to do that yet? Or
hey Ray.
Yes, sir.
Hey, one of the things that I heard today, and is it Reverend Shirley?
Shirey, yeah.
Shirey. He mentioned the hotline. We have been talking in the task force about, you know, who's in charge of certain things. I know Fair Housing does one thing, the Human Rights Commission does something else. What used to be Adult Tenant Services, which is now in Community Service and Housing, does something else. The hotline idea is, I like that idea, and because maybe that's something that can be created to tie in all the other ones, and then maybe even address some of the gaps in far as what people in neighborhoods that are experiencing gentrification need help and resources and information to help them in their situation. So I think that's something that we ought to explore. is what would it take to create a hotline and what components can be a part of that?
Yeah, I was talking to Shayla when we were meeting, and something that's been going through my mind is, I brought up the situation with the code enforcement as far as there's nobody to help people if they're retaliated against for calling code enforcement. Likewise, there's not any agency in Lexington, any individual that enforces landlord tenant law now. I know the Fair Housing Council has kind of gone out on a little bit and have dabbled in landlord tenant law, but technically they deal with fair housing law, such as the way our office deals with fair housing law. And I remember back when I began at the commission, I've been there for 23 years, but the early part, we had Shirlene Mosley in adult and tenant services and adult services. I mean, she was an advocate for the people, and she was like a bulldog, and she would latch on, and she got a lot of landlord tenant issues resolved. And I think since that group has kind of morphed over the years, it's kind of gone to social services now, but they don't really do that anymore. There's not a person, there's not a housing advocate to help people with, like I said, landlord tenant code enforcement issues. And I think it may go beyond a hotline, this housing, call it a housing czar. I don't know what we're going to call the person, but is it something? I know the city has the citizens advocate, but I've dealt with the citizens advocate a number of years, and I honestly don't know what the citizens advocate does. But I mean, if we're going to have somebody in that position, maybe it's something that we can increase their, we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. We can reassign or give more powers to that office to help people with these issues. They call in, answer questions about displacement or my, somebody just passed away and we're concerned about losing this house, or, hey, I just called code enforcement and then my manager found out and I'm going to get kicked out in 7 days, or, hey, my landlord just came into my apartment and didn't give me a notice. So I think those kind of things that lead to people getting kicked out of their apartment, we need to identify these issues early on. And a lot of times we're not being proactive, we're being reactive. The people are already displaced, they're already out of their apartments or houses, and then we're left kind of like, oh well, we should have done this, should have done that. So I do like the idea of the hotline, but I think it could have more teeth if we actually had an office or a person or a redesignation of something. Yes, Mr. Brown.
Yes,
Legislator.
I have, and I don't know if anybody else has had this problem, but we have the city has a 311 system. And it appears to me that in trying to communicate with folk at the city, and it's a problem that I have, but 311 kind of shields people in the government from the community. I don't think it's open and available to the citizens of Lexington Fayette County. It is that 311 kind of screens and or holds people at bay. You can't get to code enforcement unless you have a cell number for a code enforcement officer, and other departments in the city as well. 311 was a good thing when it was put in, but I think 311 is used to shield the representatives in the city. That if I want to talk to the mayor, I want to talk to the mayor. I don't need their assistant. If I want to talk to Councilmember Brown, and you can't hardly go directly to him. I think you can now, but when I was there, it was that there was direct access. I want to talk to Eric. I can't get Eric. I get 311, and I got to go through a myriad of people to be able to talk to him. I think that's problematic, and I have voiced that to some people before. But it's like that 311 is the guardian for keeping the gates, the gatekeeper for getting to anybody in LFUCG. Councilman Brown, what do you think?
Hey, I don't think anybody has a problem getting to me. I get phone calls and emails all the time, or they catch me in Walmart.
Well, that's what they know how to get you. They have your cell number, but for the most part, you can't get to just everybody in government.
Well, I think you make a valid point, but I think 311 was designed to try to send people directly to where the problem is, so it can be addressed. But I can see where it seems like it doesn't necessarily connect you with what you need, and I don't necessarily know how you fix that.
And I do know that in our agenda for like the last 2 meetings, it's on tonight's agenda as well, to review the neighborhoods and transition task force recommendations. There were a few recommendations specifically relating to code enforcement, and there was maybe a recommendation or two regarding, you know, somebody walking through somebody a process of this and that. So when we get to that a little bit later, hopefully some of those issues may be good, and we can take those on and add that as part of our recommendations that we're going to make. Mr. Shirey?
I was just to play out this notion of a phone number. It just strikes me that whatever we can do to mitigate people's fear, nobody makes good decisions when they're afraid. And if one is feeling that one might lose one's home and don't know where I can turn, I feel by myself, I don't have the resources, you know, flashing that check or whatever we can do to mitigate against fear. And it seems to me that 3 of the pieces are some sort of individual who can be an advocate, an ombudsman, that kind of idea, a listening, compassionate ear, information for someone that may not have the information, and then resources that are available. Fear is just a terrible thing. And of course, we all know it's misused as a terrible, fear-mongering is a great tool to do a lot of harm. And people are very vulnerable when they're made afraid. So whatever we can do to mitigate against fear. I'm sorry, I don't have the particulars yet, but I'm seeing a human being that has a sense of compassion and knowledge and the ability to point towards resources. It's extremely helpful in lowering that fear level so good decisions can be made.
And I'm seeing a lot of similarities. Several years ago, there was a big issue with, I know it's still around, but there was a focus on it several years ago. It was a predatory lending and a don't borrow trouble campaign. And I'm seeing a lot of similarities in those kind of issues as what our people that testified with tonight. It's the preying on someone's fear and vulnerabilities to spread false information to say, hey, sell me your house, I'll let you move back in. Meanwhile, you know, they're making empty promises and causing people to lose their home, and in turn, you know, changing the composition and integrity of neighborhoods. So,
and someone mentioned earlier the like the home repair assistance program, and I was curious because I've heard different thoughts and ideas, but I understand that there's a waiting list for that. And I'm curious if anyone with the city could say like how many people are on that waiting list and how far out people are from being able to receive assistance for that.
Russ, I'll jump on that one. That came up in a task force meeting about the waiting list. And once we had a meeting with the director of grants and special programs, he said the reason that there was a waiting list is because the limited amount of funds. They plan out their funds within a year time span. So the question was posed, if we put more money into the housing rehab program, will we get to get more people through the program and reduce the waiting list? And the answer was yes. So just this past budget year, there's been more money allocated to the housing rehab program in order to try to work down that list and get people more assistance. If you want to, by the next meeting, I can get that information, find out how much money was added to it and approximately how many more people can be served, if that answers your question.
Definitely, that's helpful, and that'd be really helpful information to have. I've got another question that I was going to ask of Hodge, and this is more just kind of connecting the dots, because in our last week's conversation, you talked about your observations of the weaponization of code enforcement by investors or from folks from the outside. And I guess I'm curious, when it comes to property owners, property managers, folks that are renting their homes, what's your sense of how many folks are from the communities in which those properties are? versus how many of those are owned by people from outside of the community?
I don't know the exact numbers on that, but I would probably think that, and I'm just talking about East End. That's kind of where I'm at every day, but I would guess probably it's less than 30% home ownership. Well, it may be going up a little bit now, but a lot of the home ownership is coming from the outside in now. It's not people that's been there or been around for years, if that makes sense. And also, I'm not trying to jump your question, but I also want to kind of ask city people, if code enforcement writes you up, why do you think people would trust you in going back to the city and getting loans through them to help repair the house? I think it's, I know in the African-American community, 80-year-old African-American female or male, if you don't wrote me up, I'm not going to trust you in going back and getting a loan from you. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah. So on that note, and I'm going to clarify my question also for you. Specifically the rental properties, like how many of those are owned by people from the community versus owned by people outside of the community?
Oh, okay, it'd be real easy.
Yeah.
I would say it would probably be less than 10% of people that live in the community that's got rental property. And yeah, it would be less than probably 10%, easy. It's very few now. Most of the older people have passed away and the families came in and dispersed it. So it's very few people that live in the community now that has rental property.
Okay, thank you for that. And one, a suggestion per Hodges, again, his comment about folks not trusting the city when they're the ones that have written them up. A model that I've seen work particularly around code enforcement is that the dollars flow to the neighborhood associations, and they're the ones that have written them up. And then the neighborhood associations are the one where the home applications or the repair applications are made, and that they hold that relationship there. And I can just say, for one, having Ms. Harriman and Ms. Davis on and asking them those questions about what do they need, and they said resources. This is not a statement about the city by any means, but I would say I would really trust them with those dollars and the use of those dollars with the neighbors that they know need them. And I think to be able to be able to shift that there, it would be a complete different way in which we did it, and it has to be thought through well. But I would suggest that model is explored and strongly considered so that trust factor can remain and hopefully grow.
And Russ, I think that's one heck of an ideal, because then you got people that the community already trust, and they would be more comfortable dealing with somebody than going downtown and dealing with somebody they never seen or may not even look like them.
Yeah, if you could send that, you cut out, so I didn't quite understand the full explanation, but Russ, if you could send that to us in an explanation, just a little more clear, I would greatly appreciate it. Let the record show that the Reverend Brock has joined us. Welcome. We were talking about code enforcement, and I know you had a lot to say last week about code enforcement, and I didn't know if you wanted to, based on, did you get the packet of information that we sent out from Councilmember Brown?
I did, thank you. And
is there anything you wanted to add before we move on to a different topic?
David and I met this week with along with Councilmember Brown, and code enforcement again sort of came around as a real area of equity and justice that needs to be addressed. Part of what was helpful is to hear that there had actually been work on the neighborhood in transitions about code enforcement with some changes, and that some of those changes have been implemented. And so the sense that I got from the meeting, and Councilmember Brown and David can chime in if I'm incorrect, was that, you know, that code enforcement was actually, and the city was actually very willing to work in that area and to listen in that space. So I think that's not only an area that needs some work, but actually has a history of not just lofty goals being stated down in words, but actually some real change has happened there and can continue to happen.
Thank you for that. Anything else on code enforcement before we move on? Yes, sir.
Well, the one thing I'd like to say is I agree with what you'd said earlier, Mr. Sexton, about being more proactive. And I know that in the case of a lot of these actions, whether it's evictions, whether it's code enforcement violations, there's a record. And I have to think that there's a mechanism whereby if for instance, if you are served with an eviction notice, you're going to get a call from the city saying, how can we help? If you get a code enforcement violation, that there's an automatic connection originating from the city, and we're not putting that onus on the resident to make the effort to seek out resources that they may not know exist. We can talk about phone numbers all day long, but I think that the phone call needs to come in the other direction.
Okay. Thank you.
I just have to chime in. I really like that because in my 15 years of the Fair Housing Council, the gap that was continuously there is that there's no real agency, department, or person that can advocate and assist homeowners and renters with the city. There's they just get kind of passed around to 311, the city, 211, the United Way, the Fair Housing Council, the Human Rights Commission, and what was Adult and Tenant Services. And none of us really helped, none of us could touch that area because that's not what we were funded to do. So that gap is something that we definitely need to fill. And I really like that idea, having, when they get that eviction notice, is going to call them, or they get a letter or something that says, how can we help? You're not alone. I really like that, and making it be housed in one place so people know, if I get this letter, I can go to this building and these people are going to be able to help me with these issues, because it's a huge gap in the community.
Right now, the Lexington Fair Housing Council, they got some additional funding from HUD in anticipation with all these mass evictions that are going to occur based on the COVID-19 pandemic. They've developed a website and a hotline. It's www.covid19rentershelp.org. And that's kind of what we're talking about, was kind of the essence behind that website and hotline. Essentially what it is 23 agencies have signed on to this hotline and website. And when people get an eviction notice, they go to this renter's help, they talk to somebody, and the purpose is, we don't want to play hot potato with this person. When this person needs help, they said this happened, and then they look on this list of resources and say, okay, you think there's a racial component to this, you're going to go to the Human Rights Commission. Or if it's just you need help with funds, to get a new place or to stay in your current place, here's community actions number or adult and tenant services. So, that's possibly a model that we could look at as well, because that's currently being utilized. Yes, Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, Ray, kind of in that same vein, I know a lot of focus, and I guess this is a city commission subcommittee, so I guess a lot of focus is on the city. But when we're talking about that hotline, is the city the best entity to function as the one to make that call? Like, say, because how would the city, in not every eviction instance would the city know that the eviction is occurring? You know what I'm saying? If you get an eviction through the courts, I don't think it's something that registers at City Hall that an eviction notice has been served. And then just as you know, fair housing has certain you know, mandates and funding priorities, community and residential services does too. So I'm just wondering if the city is the best place to be this connector. Is this something that, I mean, could it be a component of the Human Rights Commission? Could it be a component of fair housing? Is it its own thing? You know what I mean? I guess I'm asking that question because I think not everything falls under the city's purview. Right. And we're, you know, we're already seeing where breakdowns are occurring. So why don't we, I guess I'm just posing that question. Is the city the best place for this to be, or should we recommend it be somewhere else?
Yeah, that's what I
Because
was.
we pay taxes to you, Councilmember Brown, not to the Fair Housing Commission.
Yep, but some of the issues that are taking place aren't between the city. It's you know, some of it's civil. If it's, you know, if it's an eviction for something that's for a disagreement or a violation of a lease, that's not necessarily a city issue. That could be a civil issue, but that doesn't mean somebody doesn't need help.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I was logistically thinking, was certainly the city would be aware of like a code enforcement issue and they could call or whatever, but a private landlord, yeah, that could be a little logistically sticky. Certainly if anybody's going to recommend additional funding to the Human Rights Commission for X, Y, and Z, we would be gladly to look into that for you as well. But Councilmember Brown, do you have something else?
No, I was going to say, even the predatory piece, even the succession planning, even the, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't all ring the city's bell. And I think that's sometimes, I think it's part of the reason why we're here, is because it doesn't always hit on somebody's radar that needs to address it. That's the only reason I posed the question, not trying to avoid any work, but just making the case.
Sure. Thank you.
And that's a growing worry I've had, because I've heard rumblings that this city may be trying to get out of the social services field. And that worries me. I think that the city, people should be able to look to the city to support them, to help them, to provide the resources, at least guide them to resources. And if you get out of that field, like, where are people gonna go? So that makes me a little nervous. I think it should be a city department that there's a one-stop shop where people know, if I'm facing these 5-6 issues, that I can go to the city department. There are people there that are gonna help me. We have millions of nonprofits that are all doing phenomenal work here in the city. So if the city wants to fund a nonprofit, you know, but I really think that, I think it's upon the city to tackle this. I really do. That's my opinion.
And I haven't heard anything about the city getting out of the social service business. So I haven't heard that. And you always make me feel like I'm in a position of defending, but I'm actually not.
Let me go to Rachel first, and Mr. Shirey, I'll get you second. Yes, Rachel.
One of the things we've talked about for recommendation on the Neighborhoods and Transition Task Force is that Office of Housing becoming a comprehensive Office of Housing, not just a manager of the Affordable Housing Fund for these very issues we're talking about tonight. Is one place to go. The city may not solve all the problems, but the city could have an Office of Housing that makes referrals to people who can help solve the problems.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, our guests that began with us tonight, who they would be apt to call and why. Who would they trust? You know, if there's a sense of, no, I would never call blank or blank, I'm just curious who they would say they would be most apt to call, and why that entity, person, part of our city government is trustworthy in their eyes. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, and that's something we face at the Human Rights Commission. We've got Lexington, Fayette, Urban County, or Lexington, Fayette, in our name, and sometimes, you know, there's a trust factor, especially with like the Hispanic population of a government office saying, you know, you're here to help. So, you know, certainly that's something to keep in mind when we make this recommendation of who's going to field this, because the end goal is to make people comfortable, and this person is going to just do more than I envision just saying, well, you need to do this, but they're kind of going to walk them through the process and be there to guide them through as they move along. So anything else on this topic before we move on? Because we're running short. Shayla, do you want to take the community survey part?
Sure. We have gotten a draft of the community survey, and the city can print out copies for us. And thank you to Rachel for kind of pulling it all together and working with us and getting it done. Really appreciate that. They are, Mr. Howard, where are we in the printing process? Are we close?
I am not sure. I was under the impression they were going to be printed today, but I didn't confirm that with anybody. So I don't know.
Okay.
But I will try to find out.
Okay, great. But I did want to bring up just our distribution process, where we're going to pick these up from. I know we're all going to return them to the Human Rights Commission, or they can be mailed to the Human Rights Commission office, but how do we want to do distribution of these surveys, just to make it as easy as possible for folks? What do you all think?
We could, they asked me, the city did ask me once they were printed if I could come and pick them up, but I guess if there was a location point where they could be left at the city and we all could come and pick up, or I don't mind having them at our office, but the problem with our office is we're kind of like everybody else in a pandemic weird hours, so there's may not be anybody there a lot of the time. So
I know there was discussion last week about leveraging our church connections in this group and beyond to distribute. Is that still an option?
Absolutely. If we have some direction, we're talking hard copies right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did we decide only to do hard copies, or are we also doing something online?
The city has posted the link to the survey online. It is in the Google Drive, which is you can get from the city's website. So it's open for the public to go and click on the link. So once you go to the commission page and click on resources, we would probably have to publicize the route to get there. But the Google Drive with documents for all of the subcommittees is there, and the link is in our housing and gentrification folder. It is accessible online. It is already up there. I checked today.
And can it be submitted online as well?
Yes.
We put the link. I mean, we mailed to our constituents a paper copy, but we put a link in there if folks wanted to do it that way as opposed to doing the paper. So I think that's probably on the paper copy that you all did too, isn't it, Shayla?
I think it is. Is it, Ray?
I think so, yes.
Hey, Rachel, is this the same, we're talking the same survey, just so we're talking, I want to make sure we're talking about the same survey, but it's the same survey that you all shared on your Facebook page? The link?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, we worked on it some, and then Ray and Shayla reviewed it and gave us some feedback, and our staff person who worked on it noticed a discrepancy with the version that was online from the coalition who originally suggested it. So I think they're all the same at this point, but Shayla and Ray can answer that better than me.
I was just saying, I appreciate you all posting that on Facebook, and that's something that we followed your lead on, and I would just encourage other folks on here to utilize social media to get that out as well.
And I think we have a deadline of August 4th. Is that correct, Rachel? Is that what we said?
Yes.
So yeah, we need to move quick to get these out so we can get the most responses that we can to utilize in our decision-making process.
David, are you going to that meeting tomorrow?
Which one is that, Laurie?
Well, then you're not. If you,
No, I guess I'm not. I'm not sure.
it's the Lexington Black Clergy Association or Lexington.
Is that the one Nathal was?
It's one of, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I was wondering if that might be but do you mind emailing Nathal and seeing what that, I mean.
Absolutely. I'll do that. I'll do that right away. And my other question, no, go ahead, Laurie.
I would say we are, I mean, St. Michael's, we are open from 10 to 2 every day. I'm happy if we want to put a stack here because there are some, I mean, there's some diversity around in this area. I'm happy to get a stack here. If I'm not here, somebody is here. I think, David's church is.
And I was going to say, we're at Martin Luther King and Short, and I'm happy to have them available there. We're there 9 to 5. And we're happy to provide those from our office.
Okay.
If that can be communicated to anyone that may find our location convenient.
And we are, just FYI for St. Michael's, completely accessible for people who have mobility issues. So but I think we can touch base with Nathal and some of the Black clergy who can probably say like this church and this church and this church would be really good to put these surveys in. And then again, I think social media is great because I mean, many people have an iPhone or a smartphone that they can take the survey on.
Yeah, Hardy has done some research about seeing if we could convert it to a text survey and so people could live by text messages. Do you want to share what you found out with the committee?
Sure. So there's, as with lots of things, several platforms that can do that. And they all come with about the same fee structure where if we were trying to reach 500 people, let's say as an example, we'd be in the $75 to $85 range. I recognize that Shayla informed me the city is not going to pay for that. I'm happy to foot the bill and have whoever wants to throw me $5 if we think that's of value. I think it's only going to be as valuable as the number of phone numbers that this group or affiliated groups can provide. And I recognize that raises some privacy issues for you and your constituents. So I don't want to say it's a must do, but I think anything we can do to hit people from on multiple channels, I think that's helpful. And I'd put it to you all as to whether people would be comfortable receiving that and whether it would have any impact or not.
What do you all think?
I don't do any surveys that get texted to me.
I do worry that the time span we have to sort of gather all the phone numbers is going to be a little challenging. I think it might be better use to just get it out on social media platforms through various ways.
I would agree with you, Laurie. I think if unless someone's got a phone list ready to go that they know is going to be effective, then I think it's probably more work than it is going to yield results.
Yeah, that's what was my initial concern, was the tight timeline that we have. So we'll just urge everyone on your Facebook pages to and your personal and or business page to promote this survey. I know the Housing Coalition has already sent it out, and the one we have on here is the Neighborhood Association contact list is on our agenda, and that has been sent out to everybody. If we want to divvy up this list and maybe each take a chunk and send the survey out to them, that would be of help. I unfortunately forgot to print it out myself, so I'm not really sure how many are on that list, but if we want to divvy that up tonight and go ahead and get to work on that, that would probably be a good idea as well.
Ray, I'm fine if you want to divvy it up and then just send us say, Laurie, your starts with this and ends with this section.
Okay,
If you
I'll
wanna-
do that. Yeah, I'll take care of that.
And we'll make sure to email you the link so you can just include it in your email to them. Make it as easy
So
as
was
possible.
that list a list of neighborhood associations across the city?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And are you thinking
All
of
of the
sending something to
presidents.
every neighborhood association, or are we going to target particular neighborhoods?
That's a question. I was assuming every one of them, but if we want to just target certain neighborhoods, what do you guys think?
I guess for me, it comes down to what we hope to get out of this survey. If we want a general city-wide response to sort of questions of gentrification, that's one thing. If we want to sort of try to use this in a way to start hearing voices from the neighborhoods that we know are affected, that's a different sort of thing. So I'm less concerned to hear a survey from Heartland, to be quite honest, than I am from anybody in the East End. I realize finding the line between those is not necessarily an easy one. Don't all chime at once.
I agree with some of the comments. I think the questions themselves weed out who we're looking to get information from. So I think, I think we just use our best judgment and send them where we think we're going to get the best information. If that makes sense. Yeah.
And I'm gonna put the plug in here, like email your clergy or the leaders of your faith communities to include in your church newsletters. I mean, most churches have newsletter capacities. That's low hanging fruit, and that may reach a lot of people that otherwise may not get it via social media or something. So if you're a member of a faith community, bother your pastor.
There are a couple other things I was wanting to bring up that I think we ought to talk about as a subcommittee real quick. I know we're running out of time. One of them is, if we're good on the survey, are we good on the survey conversation? Okay. One of the things, y'all, we're talking about displacement and gentrification. The biggest, most pending threat that exists right now is this pandemic. And what's going to happen once the moratorium on evictions are lifted. I think, we've been talking about it at the city, but I think a strong message would benefit those of us at the city that advocate for affordable housing money and eviction prevention funding. I think this group ought to make a strong recommendation that when the city receives COVID funding, that we strongly consider taking a big chunk of that money and putting it towards eviction prevention initiatives. Like immediately, like council's on break now, we come back in August. We're going to start having some mid-August. We're going to start having some conversations about the reimbursement that we're getting from the state. I don't know the numbers. Shayla, maybe Art may have a better picture of what we're looking at or what we're facing, but I'm thinking we're going to be somewhere between $3 to $5 million worth of, and maybe more than that, of funding that we need to put towards eviction prevention. Because if we don't act and don't move pretty stealthily or make some pretty strong movements in that direction right now, we have the potential for a lot of people to be displaced out of the neighborhoods that they currently reside in if we don't put the funding in place. So I think this subcommittee can send a strong message and a strong recommendation to city government to make sure that we address the current crisis that is laying at our feet. So I think that's one thing. The other thing, and this is a bigger, broader issue, is when we're talking about gentrification in certain neighborhoods, the task force, the neighborhoods and transition task force, I don't feel had done a sufficient job in addressing the business component of neighborhoods that are being redeveloped and seeing gentrification, especially for the local minority business that either exists or could potentially exist in the neighborhood. So I don't necessarily know what the answer is or what it is. Well, I know it all boils down to money, but what kind of statement can we send in regards to how to encourage economic development for minorities and for locals and residents that live in these neighborhoods that are seeing redevelopment take place? A lot of times we see businesses coming in that don't always necessarily serve the best interests of the neighborhoods, even though they're good, viable businesses. But I think from what I heard, folks would like to see businesses that they can attend and will be beneficial and resources to the community. So I think this subcommittee also has an opportunity to make a statement or to make a strong recommendation on that, because I think the task force, we got down in the weeds of residents and residential concerns more so than the holistic business piece of it, which I think is a large component to the whole issue. So that's all I had.
I will definitely add those to our list. I'll add those to our list. Since we're on that, any other things you want me to add to the list? And I'm going to keep on our agenda every meeting. I'm going to keep adding the recurring things people want to add to initially be in the report. I'm going to continue to add them so we can continue to keep eyes on them and chew on those as well.
Taylor, one of the issues that Councilman Brown and Mr. Peoples brought and we talked about was the purchase of development rights, the PDR, and how, I'm making up a number here, Councilman Brown, correct me, that like $5 goes to pay people not to develop land that they weren't going to develop anyway. And what would happen if instead of $5, $4 went to them and $1 went back into neighborhoods that needed redevelopment? Like, is there a way to shift some of that funding around so that it's not all going to keep green space, but some of that money is also going back into financial redevelopment, cold hard cash to the people who need it? So I add that to the list. And I also typed in there, so I know around the Zandale area, there's several pockets of Hispanic communities. And I am just concerned that if it may be too much to do, but if there's a way that survey could be offered in Spanish, that would be helpful, I think, for some of our growing Hispanic and Latino communities in Lexington.
Lori, if I could, I'd just like to piggyback on that. Originally, when the PDR program was set up, that it was supposed to be a sharing of resources between the rural preservation and the infill redevelopment or urban development, and the infill and redevelopment was left out of the conversation. So I think it is time for a conversation to talk about infill and redevelopment and putting dollars with that, because PDR is getting the lion's share of the money just to keep our county green, which is detrimental to the growth and development of our whole community.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just add my voice because I was part of that conversation and I thought it was just a wonderful idea as we talk about providing some capital to maintain, if we're going to preserve green space, okay, but let's preserve some of our historic neighborhoods as well. And it seems like there's a connection there. I didn't know that history that you just said, so that's good to hear.
If I may, I'd just like to add on the action items, on item E, the official statement from the city regarding gentrification and displacement. I'd like to change that and put official statement from the city regarding gentrification, comma, strike and displacement and affordable housing. So let me read it the way I think it should be. Okay. Official statement from the city regarding gentrification, displacement, and affordable housing.
We tasked Mr. Howard with checking to see if we could get that. And he said the law department said no.
We ought to say yes. I mean, the thing is that it's a recommendation from this committee. And I think that ought to be something that we say. I mean, it may not be something that, but the mayor put this committee, the subcommittee together to talk about the issues and concerns in Lexington Fayette County. I think that we would be remiss in talking about gentrification and gentrification displacement and not talk about affordable housing in terms of what it is that we see as an issue in our community.
I'll put that on my homework list, if you don't mind, to follow up with the administration and kind of get some reasoning on why they might have said no, if that's okay.
And
That'd be great.
I'm not clear if you don't mind what I would suggest is, and I didn't have a conversation with anyone. I sent a list of action items that we discussed last week that I needed to work on. And that was just one of the items. Just simply asked, can this be done? And the answer I got back was no. I didn't have a conversation, but my approach to that is it's the subcommittee's work to create the statement, and the law department can review it to make sure it's consistent with what the city wants to put out, but it's really your work and not for them to do.
Yeah, we talked, I keep saying neighborhoods in transition, but we talked about this as well in that the fact that we think somebody's going to say no or not like it doesn't mean we don't put it on our list. If it's something we believe ought to be addressed, then our charge is to put it on our list. Yes.
I would definitely add it.
Hey, Shayla, one thing I'd like to add as well, and almost going back to the previous comment about the home repair dollars being funneled through the neighborhood associations, I think that there needs to be increased, I think there needs to be funding also funneled to the neighborhood associations or similar type groups to help fund the capacity to drive community solutions from within the community. And whatever that might look like, I'm not sure, but I think coming out of this, and I don't think we haven't suggested this, but if the suggestion coming out of this or some other groups is more listening, as I've had conversations this past week, I've heard people say, in some ways, we're tired of talking. We're ready to mobilize for action, and to be able to help resource that action, I think would be an incredible statement. And understanding that being coming also from the assistance coming from the city.
I got it down. I'll add that definitely.
I'd just like to add one other thing. In looking at the Commission on Racial Justice and Equality, I think this speaks to it. I think that it's our charge to step up and say that's what has to happen. That is a problem in our community. That the statement is what we think the statement is, and we make that statement.
Definitely.
One thing I'd like to add on the housing affordability side is to have a discussion about mechanisms that we as a community can take to keep housing affordable for people in the neighborhoods where they are. There's a lot of levers that can be pulled there, and I think it's our duty to find ones that can be pulled.
You know, one of the things I think occurs with the PDR program and what's occurring is preservation of the green space that we have in our community, but then we don't want to do the things that are necessary, like to build up and to be smart in development. We're not developing from a smart perspective. I'd like to see that.
We are not.
What I didn't hear.
I'm just agreeing with you. That's
okay.
all.
No, thank you. I just think that we ought to develop smart. We ought to use the land that's available in a smart way.
All right. Any other ones that people would like to throw out? Okay, well, it is 8:02 and we don't want to hold you too far past the time that we agreed to. But I just would like to put a little bug in your hat. There are going to be a series of town hall meetings that the commission as a whole is going to host. At each meeting, a different topic of the subcommittee is going to be addressed. And so our topic will be addressed on August the 4th. So if you can mark your calendars for August the 4th. And members of the subcommittee, not everyone, but there's some spots for some subcommittee members to be on the panel for the town hall. And if you're interested in being on that panel, let me, Ray, or I know. We get one additional spot, but Ray and I are definitely willing to give up our spots on the panel if you all would like to be on that panel. You all are definitely more experts than we are, definitely on these subjects. So if you're interested in being on that panel for the town hall, just let Ray or I know, and we will gladly give up our seats. Because we are only given one additional panelist spot. So.
What time is that, Shayla?
It'll be from 6:30 to 8? I think it's 6:30 to 8.
That's right. Yeah.
6:30 to 8 in the evening.
Yeah, on the 4th. Let me double check. 6:30 to 8. Yes, you're correct. And the specific format is not really known at this point. It's going to be moderated by Renee Shaw, and she's going to be pulling from some things to have questions, but then people are also going to be able to email questions in during the program. So certainly there be some opportunities for the experts to weigh in on this issue. And like Shayla said, we'd be gladly to let some of you all take our spot, because, you know, you guys probably know a lot more than we do. So it's an opportunity to, you know, share the work of this commission or this subcommittee. So just let us know.
Is this only going to be, excuse me.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Okay.
Mr. Brown. I thought you were done. Sorry.
No, I was asking, is this just going to be how gentrification and housing, or are we going to?
We're going to be, the only one that's by itself is I believe it's the
health disparities.
Health disparities. We're going to be with the public safety one.
Okay.
Law enforcement, public safety, and the courts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Russ.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going back to Shayla's prior question. I know we're over time, but just one more idea or one more thought.
Yeah.
And it's specifically around code enforcement. I mean, I think what we've learned in this pandemic is we can put a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures. I would suggest that there's some sort of a moratorium on the consequences of code enforcement for households that don't, I don't know how you qualify that right now, but until there's a system in place and things are synced up in a manner so that people have the resources they need to be able to address those challenges.
Got it.
Are you talking about getting behind the 8 ball during the pandemic challenges? Is that?
Well, I mean, I think frankly, and not to go way back, but our prior conversations have led to that part of what's coming out through code enforcement and the challenges that exist within neighborhoods is decades and decades of issues, not just pandemic induced. So I said what we learned in the pandemic is we can put a halt on some stuff.
Okay.
And I would suggest taking that lesson and putting that forward towards some sort of a moratorium for households. And again, however it gets qualified, but that have had years and years of living in communities that have been disinvested from, so that there's a system in place to help people remain in home and in community.
I like that, Russ.
It's good. I got it. All right. Is there anything else, Ray, we need to remind folks of?
The last meeting, this committee expressed interest about a phone number exchange. We sent out earlier this week a Google document that's just sign up for it. It's going to have ask for your work number, your cell number, and email. Just if you just put whatever contact information you feel comfortable sharing with us. We're not going to publicize it or anything. It's just for our utilization here on this commission.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't get it, let us know. We'll resend that. No problem.
Mm-hmm.
But how about what Shayla and I usually meet every Friday to kind of decompress these meetings and figure out what we need to do. I know a lot of stuff's been thrown out on the table, and we're going to have to start voting on some stuff and getting a consensus or, about what we kind of want to put in our report. So after we meet tomorrow, we'll formulate a kind of a document. She did put it on the agenda, the key themes, but I think if we could get a working document that kind of shows where we're headed, and we'll get that out before the weekend so we can start reviewing that, because I think our plan is to start assigning some final report duties to some individuals, asking for volunteers, things of that nature. So
I want this to be a true team effort.
Thank you all for doing that. It's good leadership. Appreciate it.
And I guess one other thing, since the last two meetings we've had discussed the neighborhoods and transition task force recommendations and we never get to it, how about everybody's homework for the next meeting is to actually review those recommendations. They have, and as Reverend Brock pointed out, some of these things have already been instituted, like through code enforcement, but go through the recommendations supported by the task force and then the items that the task force is still a consideration. And if there's any of these you think, obviously after this group disbands, the neighborhoods and transition task force is going to resume their work. So a lot of these things may get carried on, but if there's something in here that's jumping out that you guys think that we need to also make a part of this subcommittee's recommendations, please be ready to add them to the list next week. And we'll just save some time by not having to read through it like we're a bunch of kindergartners and tell us what you think. So everybody do that for next meeting. That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we adjourn? All right. Thank you all for a great meeting. You all did wonderful, and look for some emails to come your way.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Bye.